Okay, so the Revelation is perhaps the most debated book in the Bible, and it's also a book which rests on all the other books of the Bible. It is packed full of references and allusions and illustrations and quotations and symbolism drawn from both Old and New Testaments. Okay, so Revelation is one of the two books, I think, where their place in the Bible is important. You could have almost any order of the books of the Bible that you like, except for Genesis and Revelation. They need to be at the beginning and at the end of the Bible, which actually makes Revelation quite important. And Revelation does contain some very profound truths and encouragements concerning the Christian life and discipleship. And we must never forget that this is a letter, just like Paul's letter and his epistles. This is a letter to churches, and therefore there is pastoral truth in Revelation. There is a pastoral element to this book. John was a pastor. He was a pastor to a network of churches that he's writing to, and these churches were in a Roman province of Asia, Western Turkey. John was a prisoner at this point on Patmos, an island 62 miles out into the Aegean Sea. So John was a church leader physically removed from his congregations. And you should hear some of the heart in that. So Revelation is primarily a pastoral letter giving spiritual direction and encouragement to these churches. Roman Asia at this time was a dangerous place for a Christian. Domitian was an emperor, and he insisted that he be worshipped as Lord God, as a Lord and God. He was insistent on this, and this left Christians in a terrible predicament. Okay, all trade merchants, all businesses fell under something called guilds, and each guild, you had a stonemason's guild, a blacksmith guild, a fisherman's guild, whichever your particular skill was, had a guild. And each guild had worship services, and each service it would honour Domitian as Lord and God. So for a Christian to refuse to do this, if a Christian said, I can't do that, it would result in expulsion from the guild and almost certainly losing his ability to trade and do business, which in turn would lead to a loss of his income and possibly destitution. So what John does in this letter of Revelation is not withhold. He doesn't kind of sugarcoat life. He doesn't sugarcoat anything in Revelation. It's a candid description of what the followers of the Lamb must pass through as they follow him to the New Jerusalem. On the other hand, however, John embeds in this letter words of comfort and encouragement within his words of the journey between Roman Asia and the New Jerusalem. So he does both. He doesn't sugarcoat it. He tells us this is going to be awful in some respects. It's going to be a tough journey. On the other hand, there are the words of comfort and encouragement to believers to undertake that journey. The goal of the book of Revelation is to bring encouragement to believers in all ages. And this is the encouragement Revelation brings. God is working out his purposes even in the midst of suffering, tragedy, and even apparent satanic domination. The focus of Revelation is how the church is to conduct itself in the midst of an ungodly world, and to comfort the people of God to persevere in the assurance that their final reward is certain. So to understand Revelation requires, and I've said this before, requires a strong understanding of the Old Testament. There are 404 verses in Revelation. 278 contain references to the Old Testament, over half. So you need to understand the Old Testament pretty well in order to grasp what Revelation is saying. Revelation is also known as apocalyptic literature. It's just a big word to say end times or, end of the age literature. A form of writing that, despite all the visible signs that we're losing. I mean, if you look at the world today, in certain parts of the world, not all, in certain parts in the West, if you look at England, you look at Europe, some portions of America, you would look at the world and think the church is losing. We're losing people, the church is diminishing. The point of Revelation and apocalyptic literature is to say we're actually on the winning side. We're on the right team, the team that wins, okay? God will conquer in the end. He has won. The victory has been secured. His kingdom is established. And regardless of how the world looks, we will win in the end. And the apocalyptic writer is a visionary who sees beyond the present miseries to the end of all things. That's the point of apocalyptic literature. He's seeing beyond, if you like, he's got to the top of the mountain and he looks across the valley and says, you know, it's tough down there, but I can see the end. I can see the future. When God will draw everything back under his sovereignty, under, as the Revelation says, every tear will be wiped clean. No more disease, no more death. Revelation is apocalyptic, but it is also infused with the gospel of Christ that insists the victory of God over evil is not just in the future, but it's present now. We can live it now. Revelation clearly teaches that. It is present for us in this age now. And the author is almost certainly the Apostle John. There's some debate over that, but it's I think it's almost certainly John, and I think it's probably written AD 90, some 20 years after the fall of Jerusalem. There are four ways that Christians have tended to look at Revelation, and we'll look at these. So the first is the first view sees Revelation as referring mainly to the events only of the Roman Empire and the period up to just after AD 70 and the destruction of Jerusalem. So Babylon becomes a code for Rome in Revelation, and the prophecy was given, because it's past, it's in the past, it's happened. The prophecy was given to encourage a very harassed church during a time of difficulty. Now, while there is certainly some of this in Revelation, I don't think it's the whole story. A second viewpoint that's approached Revelation sees it as a chronological account of future history. The idea of this view is that in symbolic language, the span of history between Jesus' ascension into heaven and his return was prophetically given in chronological order. So there is a chronology to the book of Revelation that you would read through. Now, while the Revelation does throw light on all of world history in every age, the problem with this view is that it focuses on one aspect of history, which is trying to squeeze Revelation into the events of a particular period of history. So people have said the 10 European nations was a fulfillment of Revelation, or the Middle East, or so forth, and they take one aspect and say this is a sign of this prophetic account. I don't think that's necessarily helpful. The third view, the most common view of Revelation, sees Revelation as dealing with the final few years of world history. Lots of denominations have thought of Revelation as either the final 10 years of history, where there's a rapture, there's the Great Tribulation, and so forth. And so most of the prophecies in Revelation are seen as yet to be fulfilled. They are future to come. And I would suggest that that's not. I don't necessarily hold to that. I don't think that's right. The fourth view is a view that says that all the images and symbols are too complex to interpret, and so this view simply says that you have to interpret Revelation in general conclusions. And the way that I would say this is very simple. God is in charge, evil will be defeated, the saints will be kept safe. Just as a joke, that's often called millennialism. There's amillennialism, premillennialism, postmillennialism. Pan millennialism is that everything pans out in the end. It'll work itself out. That's kind of the fourth view. I would suggest to you there is an element of all four in Revelation. That not just one view on their own doesn't cut the mustard, but all of them have some truth into the book of Revelation, because it contains all four elements. There's some past history, there's some prophetic history, there's some future history. Okay, does everyone still hear me? Good. Okay, I just had a note come up saying my internet is unstable, so I'm obviously unstable. What I would like to put to you is that Revelation has one message. This is where I'm landing. This is what I'm going to try and unpack with Revelation as we study it. I think it has one message. It's the same message described in a number of different ways. And as we go through Revelation, I'll show you how that unpacks. But each time it is described, each time this message is described, it's seen with a particular emphasis. Sometimes from the earth, sometimes from heaven. So as we read the sequences, we seem to find the same basic pattern or basic story told several times. The church, or Christians, experience troubles, judgment and persecution, all ending with the great shaking and thundering of the Lord as Jesus is triumphant at the end. Okay? In other words, I would suggest that Revelation is not telling us a long chronological chain of events, but the same big picture of history over and over, and each telling of this story is parallel to the others. It seems that the whole church age is basically in view in Revelation, from my perspective. The entire era is stretching from Christ's first coming right through to his second coming. And I want you to understand this. I think when the Revelation says the end of the age, that is what it's concerning. The end of the age includes the first coming of Christ to the second coming. That portion, that's the end of the age. These visions are given to strengthen the Christian, regardless of what era they may have lived in. Okay, so it's applicable for the Apostle John, for Martin Luther, for John Wesley, for us. Wherever we are in the history of the world, this message is to strengthen Christians at whatever age, whichever part of the history we're in. We also learn from Revelation the patterns that we can expect history to reveal. So Revelation does show us how history will unfold all the way up to the return of Christ, when Jesus will finally come to destroy all his enemies, put Satan into the fiery pit, and establish the new earth and the new heaven. But the majority of Revelation is not about the future age, I would suggest. And we'll try and unpack that as well. As Christians in this age, we are meant to read this book and its series of visions to help us be equipped, to equip us for the age we live in now, to stand firm and to endure through all the opposition that we face, all the suffering we see, and all the injustice of this passing age. Because we face that today. That's what we see. We see injustice, we see suffering, we see opposition, we see difficulties like that. And I think Revelation gives every church in every age the tools to equip us to stand firm in it and to be able to be kingdom people in the age that we live in. At the same time, the same message is proclaimed through each vision. So each of the visions that in Revelation has the same message. The Lamb wins. The Lamb wins. The Lamb wins. The Lamb that took away the sin of the world wins. So to illustrate what I've been saying, let me just read, if you know Matthew 24, which is a very interesting passage, but Matthew 24 verses 4 to 14, I'll read it to you, which says, Jesus replied to them, "Watch out that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I'm the Messiah,' and they will deceive many. You are going to hear of wars and rumours of wars. See that you are not alarmed, because these things must take place. But the end is not yet, for nation will rise up against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these events are the beginning of labour pains. And when they will hand you over to be persecuted, and they will kill you, you will be hated by all nations because of my name. Then many will fall away, betray one another, and hate one another. Many false prophets will rise up and deceive many, because lawlessness will multiply. The love of many will grow cold, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. And this good news of the kingdom will be proclaimed in all the world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So this passage is often debated about when it's going to take place, where is this set, what is this prophecy relating to. So let me give you a layout of Revelation in the various sections, and these sections we'll study in the coming weeks. But I think that this passage of Matthew 24 relates, is an expansion, if you like. Matthew 24 is an expanded commentary on Revelation, and we'll see that through our study. So hold Matthew 24 close to you as we go through Revelation. Let me just give you an outline of where we're going to go. We're going to see various aspects of Revelation. Jesus, the Alpha and Omega. Jesus, the ruler of God's creation. Jesus, the Lamb and the Lion of the Lamb. Jesus, the Lamb who opens the seals. Jesus, the seven trumpets. Jesus, slain before the creation of the world. Jesus, treading the winepress. Jesus, Lord of lords, King of kings. Jesus, the triumphant rider. And Jesus, the divine bridegroom. That's how I view Revelation. Jesus is at the center of it, and it unpacks an aspect of Jesus. One of the main symbols in Revelation is numbers. You'll get to know that very quickly, and there's some very important numbers which keep reoccurring, so that we need to be aware of that. They keep cropping up, and I'm going to give you a few of them that you can go away and study over this week if you want to. And they pop up a lot in the Revelation. Number 4, the number 4 pops up a lot in Revelation. And it is often known as the number of creation. 4 points of a compass, 4 winds of the earth, 4 points of the earth, 4 seasons of the earth. There are 4 heavenly creatures who keep watch over the earth, the cherubim, ruling cherubim. And so forth. So 4 is a big number in Revelation. 6 is a huge number in Revelation. Humanity is created on the 6th day. Humanity works for 6 days. So 6 is often seen as the number of man, which helps understand 666, which we'll come to in the study of Revelation. I'll leave it at that. 7 is a number of perfection, is known as the number of perfection. Or rest. So 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 thunders, 7 bowls. All of that is mentioned in Revelation. 8 is another big number in Revelation. Some theologians call it the number of the new creation. So the final festival of the Levitical feasts, which is the Feast of Tents or the Feast of Tabernacles, is the only feast that lasts 8 days. It's the feast that illustrates the end of time. It lasts for 8 days. So, interesting. Circumcision was done on the 8th day. Is that connected? We'll find out. Number 10 is a big number in Revelation, which is often associated with totality or completeness. So God speaks 10 times in the creation of the heavens and the earth. There's the 10 commandments, the 10 plagues. That's what theologians think. Number 12 is another big number in Revelation, often related to kingdom or government. 12 tribes of Israel, 12 apostles, 12 foundations of the city of God, 24 elders in the heavenly vision, 12 and 12. Is that connected? We'll look at that. And finally, we need to say something about 3.5. you're going to hear a lot about 3.5 or 1,200 and something. I can't. What's that? That number in Revelation. I've forgotten it off the top of my head all of a sudden. But 3.5 is a big number in Revelation, and we're going to have to look at that as well. But if 7 is a number of perfection, apparently 7 is the number of perfection, then 3.5 is less than perfect, and it signifies a time of suffering and persecution in Revelation. 3.5, often known as the tribulation, and it signifies also a short period of time. So we'll be looking at that as well. So I've probably bored you enough with that introduction on Revelation. So that's just an outline of some of the things we're going to look at and try and unpack. It's a huge book, and we'll try and spend some time seeing how Revelation is relevant for today in our Christian life, and how we use it as Christians in order to stand firm in the culture that we live in and some of the issues that we face. All right, so I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions.